Hey everybody, I'm Ben,
I'm Karen,
and we're the Shippers.
and we're designers, illustrators, and writers. And today we're talking about The Little House by Virginia Lee Burton. And it's about a little house that gets built in the countryside, and the city moves in, and it talks about the passage of time. So, a lot of like really fun imagery, but also pretty important themes.
Yeah, we love books, we love printed material, and Karen, you found this like at Goodwill, probably?
Yeah, 25 cents probably.
Yeah, it wasn't one we grew up reading, but we love finding these things, reading them, and sharing them. So that's what we're gonna
Yeah.
do.
Ben, what are you working on?
So I am working on a graphic novel called Joe Death and the Graven Image. This is the tentative cover, no color yet, but this is what it's looking like. And it's a skeleton, kind of the Grim Reaper representation, with a little moth buddy lives inside his chest cavity. Here is some character sketches and concept design. And I share a lot of this stuff through my newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter. If you want to sign up for that, go to benjaminshipper.com.
And I am working on, it's coming out, 2022 is coming out. So this is a calendar that has the calendar on the front, and on the back side is 5x7 flowers and art prints. So there's 12 unique art prints. And let me just scroll through it real quick for you. But yeah, it'll add a lot of color to your space, and you can find my work on karenschipper.com.
Double use calendar, art and calendar. All right, let's go. Let's break into it. Let's show the back, the front. So this is really fun. This isn't the original cover.
Yes, it's the Children's Choice Book Club, part of Scholastics. I believe it came out in like the 60s to like the 80s. Don't quote me on that, but there's a wide variety of really amazing kids books that are just for like age like 3 to 7 that they really promoted for. But it's that
And the
being
first printing is pretty valuable, is it?
yeah, I got this for 25 cents, but if you can find the original cover with the dust jacket, it can go for like thousands of dollars. So be on the lookout.
Start your race. I love just this little thing, because I'll point this out because it repeats in the indicia in the inside cover, but it's just a little like monster that they have for that little label. But it is also in here on the first behind the title page, but just these little cartoons I think are really fun when they show up.
It's like, what is it doing? Like chewing on the book with this like little mustache or teeth? Who knows?
Yeah, it's like one of those McDonald's like characters. But anyway, first title page and
the end pages are beautiful. I think it goes from, it goes from this side to this side. I don't know if you can see, and it already shows the passage of time from the horse carriage buggies and then to the city. And so if we dive into the book, we'll
like
see
ribbons. It's almost like washi tape. Like,
oh man, that would be awesome.
A little, what is this, like 18th century or 19th century, and it goes on, and foreshadowing for what happens in the story.
Yes. So Story and Pictures by Virginia Lee Burton, and I love just how simple the cover page. Virginia Lee Burton is pretty iconic for her. The way she draws, like her picture, how her text and pictures all work together really well. It's a little funky, with all the curly cues, but then it mimics it through the trees, And I love this little antenna, smoke, happening out of the
Everything is just pointing you right in. It's just also, it's also symmetrical. It just points you right into the doorway. I think this book illustration is odd, but I think there's charm because of that oddness. There's just, I think, a lot of ways in which I wouldn't do something, or maybe modern books wouldn't do things, but are done here, and it's interest. It's
yeah, and all of this is actually not typed out. It's all lettered. You can see very it's pretty uniform, but you can see slight what's the opposite?
Hand lettering.
Yeah, slight like differences between like the E, and that's why you know it's lettered and not just a font. So yeah, let's dive in. So just to set them like the space, like this house was built in the countryside. She was a pretty little house, and she was built strong and well. She was strong and well built. This little house shall never be sold for gold or silver, and she will live to see our great grandchildren's great grandchildren living in there. In her, actually, like.
So the house is the story, like obviously as the title suggests, but she really leans in with the writing, describing as she and her, and the people that made her are important, but they're not.
They're not the hero, no. The protagonist.
Yeah, protagonist. Yeah.
Yeah. But you can see like the way they're dressed, like it's
old.
Yeah. And you'll see as the book continues that the way the people dresses kind of change as well, which is really fun to see. And it starts off about setting the scene with like the passing of time and seasons. And so it starts with like the day, and then it goes into nighttime. And
the moon doesn't get a face here. She gave the sun a fun little waking and sleeping face.
Yeah. And I love that, like, as like, you know, in the middle of the day, the sun really is at its highest, so it's smaller, whereas like in the bottom, it's pretty big.
It's just waking up over here, and it's getting ready to go to sleep.
Yeah,
and the moon takes over.
Yeah. And just a little background for Virginia, and she always drew her pictures first before she wrote any words. And she her first book that she wrote, publishers would not take it because it was way too boring, but she didn't understand it. But she finally read it to her son, and her son fell asleep, and she was like, oh wow, like that's why they wouldn't take it. So from there on out, all the books that she wrote, which she has written quite a few,
tested by her kids.
Yeah, she would test it with her kids first. So as you can see, like the design of this spread is like, I think it's really pretty. Like you can like, it starts from here, you read it, and it goes into like a you know, a golden roll spiral kind of thing.
A snail. I see a snail. There's the shell. Here's the snail's hat.
And I love all the details that she puts into the illustration. From like, you know, this bird is flying, and then like it gets like the little like morning worm.
Everything has its rhythm, and we see the world almost here. We see a horizon now, and in the daylight, I guess.
And
horses and goats playing.
I think as a parent, like herself, she really like taught. I mean, I can see like me reading to our son, and like just like telling him to point us out, like, oh, like what, you know, what season is this? Like, you know, flowers are blooming, the like trees are blooming, and what happens in spring, you know? Like she has a very like keen observation on the seasons, I feel like.
It's like a spring icons, like birds, flowers, and we go to summer.
Yeah, and the daisies like start coming out. So all the
things that were planted like are growing. All the agriculture is growing. Like the plowed fields are now full of corn.
And like even like the changes from like, you know, like a tree, like really it turns super green in the summer. Like we live in Greenville, South Carolina, and it's so green and in the summer, and this really reminds me of that.
A little skinny dipping.
A little skinny dipping.
Seasonal. Skinny dipping is very seasonal.
Yeah. And so I love how she like hides all these like little things into this like, I mean, really compact page. None of it has to exist. Like she could have just made it really like simple or like flat, but like there's so much like imagery in it.
Yeah, really, you know, really figuring out how like, just the abstraction because of scale. Like I can tell that horse is drawing a carriage. Like these are really small little things, like a Where's Waldo almost, but they're so readable and graphic.
Yeah. And I love that the little house is so happy here. Like she, you know, like the personification.
Watch this house. It's gonna change as her situation changes. Her look will kind of change too.
And here's fall, and these are apple trees. So like, as you know, apples really are in season in the fall time. That's when apple picking happens, and so I love that. Like
the contrast. It's not just all brown.
Yeah. And then like the geese flying in, and the first
kids going back to school.
Yeah, kids going back to school. And even here you already see like slowly, like even like the carriage is starting to change. Like
Winter.
And yeah, she's still a little happy little house. And then she says, like, the children grew up and went away to the city, and now at night the lights of the city seemed brighter and closer. Because in the beginning of this book, you see this like little light in the horizon, and Doc talks about how the city is really far off in the distance, but she was always curious what it would be like to live in the city. And here, as the children grow up, like, we see, we'll see what that looks like. So like it says
disruptive event is happening.
Well, the city moves in closer and closer, and so what does that look like industrial wise? And
just this straight line cutting right across the horizon, and it doesn't follow like the rules of perspective. I mean, this tractor over here, this or I guess steamroller.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's like so much bigger than this house and everything, but it's right on the same plane essentially. But it doesn't matter. It's an icon. It's informational, and that it's so disruptive.
It says like pretty soon along came a steam shovel and dug a road through the hill covered with daisy. It's like pretty sad. Like I mean, like it was the house surrounded by like trees and daisies, and like all of a sudden there's this like giant road that comes in.
And she's describing. She doesn't say asphalt. She says like little stones and then big stones and then sand and tar, and then a roller is coming in. And that's what makes asphalt. But I think the house is aware of like the natural elements that make up the world, and so this kind of artificial combination is it's mysterious to her.
And I think like the emotion of that little house is kind of like, what's happening? Like it's pretty happy here. So like even like a very subtle like change. I don't
know if it's changing. I think
you don't think so?
I think it's like
I'm reading into it. Yeah.
It definitely does change, but when does it start is a good question, because it's like
that's true.
It's like
but this is interesting. Like the little man from like the very beginning, he has a cane now, so like this is past like almost one generation, and we're moving into the next. And like the little buggy, the horse carriages changes into these little buggies as well. And another note
it
to
says little road closed sign.
And it says for repair detour. Like, and there's this like surveyor, like I think that's what it is, right? Like I love that. Like it's such tiny details. I just love it. I like this guy like with his like little stance, like please stop. But just a little note as well, like Virginia, she like this shape starts with like on this like night scene, and it repeats like throughout the book, and it just the scenery is the thing that changes. The house stays where it is, the shape practically stays the same. So as a design note, that's pretty like fun, I feel like.
Consistent frame.
Yeah.
So
you see like the seasons and like the like changes of everything very like prominently, because something is like the same. And so as the city moves in, more cookie cutter houses come in. You see these little people like with their hats like go into the city, and gasoline station comes in, and that road was built for something. It's gotta. Some of the apple trees start disappearing, and the little pond disappears. So like in a way it's kind of like spot the difference for kids. I feel like it could be, which I feel like at this stage this is probably like most of America right now. I don't know. I mean, there's definitely rural and there's definitely city, but a lot of places where people live, you are in suburbia, I would say. Yeah.
smoke starting to creep into the sky.
Yeah, the blue sky is kind of being pushed out by like possibly pollution, possibly, but and then, we have like furniture movers and all these different cars, just the technology changes. So like Burton is so good at drawing like machinery and like really like nature, which I'm pretty like, that's pretty incredible. I feel like it's definitely like a mastery. Like I hate drawing buildings and like making them really interesting, like all of them. And she does a really good job.
Yeah, she's found her language for each element in the book, even though it is so different. She's found a way of doing them all.
And her other books, I mean, most people probably know about like Mike Mulligan and his steamroller. That's also machinery that's personified, and that also is so well drawn. All of her machinery is just really good. But she obviously really likes nature, and it talks about like, like the changes of environment. And in here, so like the city lights move into this, into the countryside. At this point, it's not even a countryside anymore. And the city is like, oh wow, like this is what it must be living in the city. Like
she's big city girl now.
Yeah, and she's like, I kind of miss the daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight.
And the seasonal kind of things that were represented on this side of the book are now represented by like lampposts and lights. And I do think of that as like a icon of the city. It's like a little tiny, like a wing-ding representing the city, whereas like a leaf would be representing the forest or rural.
And it's like she, at this point, she no longer can like see like what season it is. Like there's no like nature telling you like, oh, it's, like it's this flower blooming in the spring and the trees, like all the trees are gone at this point. But here we get to see her draw people, which is, I think, really fun. All her people, for the most part, all their clothing is one color, and it's just a shape. But I think it's like she still like puts in lots of like the right like posture for them. So
these look like your people.
Yeah,
they're very part of the world. They're not like they're part of each other and the space. They're not necessarily like this is this person. It's very iconic.
And so the train and the dust and smoke, it gets louder. She doesn't know, like you see that
tidal wave of smoke.
Yeah, and like the house is definitely no longer happy. She's not being taken care of, and it says here like she couldn't tell whether spring came or summer or fall or winter. It all seemed about the same, and people are just rushing about.
Got a big train above her.
Yeah. So
well, it wasn't above us, but when we were in New York, we had a train. We live very near. We were on top of the 6th line, and it was so that would be sort of the 6th, and this would be where we were living in an apartment. And man, it was loud, but we got used to it.
Yeah, I grew up in Hong Kong, and so like it didn't bother me too much. Like I probably came from the city feeling like really like I was pretty unaware of like the changing of seasons. Like I lived in Hong Kong, it's very tropical, so I mean it'd get cold, but then like I never saw the leaves change colors or anything like that. So like, but then growing up in the city, I never really found it to be sad or anything. But then now that I get to experience like
the displacement, I think that she's feeling is the reason.
Like this is not the home that she grew up in
or designed for.
Or designed for, yeah.
Kind of for that. I love cutaways, and this is like really fun. I like this part where there's just cutaway layers of activity and hustle and bustle, and that's really fun to me. Sad for her, but fun for me.
But then here more and more, it's funny because I feel like these couple pages all starts as pretty soon there was an elevated train. Pretty soon there was a subway. Pretty soon they tore down the apartment houses, and it's like it happens so fast. Like once like development comes in, it just keeps coming and keeps coming. And really, I think it says like pretty soon instead of it's fall or spring. Like because you really couldn't tell. So it's, in a way, time doesn't.
To her, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
house, so it's like her soon is like maybe 20 years. Like
Right.
this, to us, this would be like, man, that, wow, this is a large amount of time that's passing, but
Yeah.
to her, it is a different time. It is amazing what she's doing with time here.
Yeah, so like it's like in the fall and in the winter, but this is marked by pretty soon. So it's the season is pretty soon, which is interesting. And these little guys, like
Dance party.
it's awesome. I love it. Yeah.
Blue collar work.
Yeah, and then she only saw the sun at noon and didn't see the moon or stars at night at all because the lights of the city were too bright. I think Virginia does such a good job, like setting up the scene to make you like remember, like, oh, like you can see the sun and the moon and the seasons, and here you don't see it anymore. And the little house was very sad and lonely.
Sad. Got an X on the door.
Yeah,
No
and
one's
her
going in
windows
that.
were broken. Though she was just as good as a house as ever underneath. And I think that's just so sweet.
It counts.
Yeah.
Or some kids threw some bricks in the window. That's real sad.
Yeah.
But she's got it where it counts.
Yeah. And so, like, I mean, it doesn't add in a sad place. Like, here, this little family was like, oh my goodness, this, my grandmother used to live in a house just like that, covered with, on a hill covered with daisy and the apple trees going around, and they rescued her. But on this page, I love the art here. Like, people aren't just like, there's, like before it was just like a one color suit for everything. Now we're starting to introduce some other kind of fashion, like probably flapper dresses and like just like leopard print and little
I like the purple suits. I see a couple purple suits.
Yeah.
Those are fun.
Yeah.
And the color is spare. It's
but it really pops with
Yeah.
the like the
Gray.
concrete and the dark, and then more and more hustle and bustle. But here, like, really, the traffic is stopped for them to move the house out, because I love this. She's built so well, we could move her anywhere, like the house itself is so,
So, guess they kept that deed in the house, and they're just like, that's ours. We'll
and
take it out of
little
here.
like horse cops and horse.
Yeah, there's one there too.
Yeah, but these like airplanes up here too, like that's a new technology that's introduced into this page.
It's not slowing down.
And then here she is being moved out, and like instead of like the illustration being on this side, it moves into this side, but the same shape is pretty much kept the same, except, and now you see like all of the like kind of developmental changes through like the lifetime of the house, from like the country and then like slowly to suburbia and then into like little more farmland. And they're trying to find the perfect place for her, and she kind of goes back to like where she originally started, which is on a hill with daisies and apple trees.
It's further out.
Yeah.
The sequel is going to be when it comes out again. And she gets so mad, she like blows up and destroys the city. Do you think this is necessary, where it's mirroring the road?
Yeah, I think this is really. I mean, okay, because I think it's Virginia Lee Burton. She always she starts off with the picture always, right? And then she fills in with the words. Like, pictures mean a lot to her. There was a quote that she wrote, she said something about, I don't have it in front of me right now, but she was saying how like if you can design something well, children get it, and they learn the aesthetics and beauty that comes out of imagery. So she always start with pictures first, and then like she would add words to it, and she never considered herself a writer. But then I think because to her, maybe it's the form. So in a way, like it's the form of even like the text and how it's set.
The writing's real simple too. It's not, which doesn't mean it's easy, but it's very like, it's real. It's almost like, I think writers, a lot of our hang up is like trying to be clever, and I don't think she's trying to be clever at all. I think she's just describing what's happening, and putting herself in the shoes of the
And I think this was actually like
foundation of the house.
she was inspired by her own like story. I think the house that she lived in, they moved from the city out into the country. Like they didn't start with the country, moved into the city, but like so it was kind of inspired by her own life, which is where a lot of good stories I feel like can start from.
Got a fresh coat of paint.
Yeah, and she's really happy here.
Very happy.
But then here, the seasons and the sun and the moon and, you know, the daisies and everything is coming back in. And once again, she was lived in and taken care of. So definitely a happy ending. And I think it's a great, and there's one more page. And never again would she be curious about the city. Never again would she want to live there. The stars twinkled above her. A new moon was coming up. It was spring and all was quiet and peaceful in the country. So
I love it. It's such a good representation of age, I think. Like it's everyone who's anyone is going to grow old, and we're going to see changes, and we're not going to adapt as well as we think that we would. But I think there's hopeful return to something of our past, or the future isn't always doesn't always have to be seen as something bad, and I think it should be seen as a challenge. And this is actually the final scene in Hellboy. So for any comic fans watching, Hellboy returning to a home essentially that's under stars and filled with light inside. It's a real iconic image of, I think, of a healthful rest. It's something very special. And I love night scenes in picture books. Every night scene in a picture book or in a comic.
Brownie points for Ben. And a little like, I never pointed this out, but the way she like illustrates is like kind of like almost pointillism-ish. But then like it's funny how like even here like there's a slight like spiral, like almost like a starry night in a way. Like
stars are aligned.
Yeah.
It's all right.
So yeah. Well, if you find this at a thrift store, at a bookstore, it's definitely worth picking up. I think there's a lot of gems in it. Just as like the beauty of the book and the story itself, it has a lot of,
part of the title. It says The Little House, and it says Her Story.
I think
by
it
Virginia Lee Burton.
Yeah.
This is like a subtitle or something. It's very
interesting.
It's very odd.
Yeah.
But...
I like it. I love, yeah. Yeah. I also love like these like little like apples like in the little spiral. She's all about spirals, I think. But it's beautiful.
Folky. Cool.
All right. Well, Ben, tell us where people can find you.
Again, you can check me out on my Instagram and website. It's just my name, benjaminschipper.com, and sign up for my newsletter, Old Noggin, which you can do at my website, benjaminschipper.com.
And you can find my work on Instagram, karen.schipper, and then on my website, www.karenschipper.com. I do stationery, cards, art prints, art for the color lovers. So check us out. A lot of
your cards, I think, are very, like, the people are very much like this. Very fun, very...
Well, I'm so inspired by picture books and, like, the colors that, like, a lot of the older picture books, like, have. Like, they... Art back then. I mean, I think there's still a lot of good art these days, but just, it just really resonates with me.
Somehow you get the traditional feel with just by not like not needing everything to be perfect. But anyway, check those out.
Yep.
And come back and subscribe to our channel and
see you next time.
More. Bye.